Welcome everybody to Tribe Talk. You're here with Rachel Evans
and Laura Neal.
And today we're talking about why some children have glowing reports in school and everything seems fine in school, but then when they get home, behaviours tend to fall apart.
So does this sound like you? You pick your child up from school at the school gate, the teacher hands them over and says they've had a great day, they've been absolutely fine, and you get in the car, sometimes make it home. For some parents they don't even make it to getting in the car, but as soon as you're alone with them, everything goes to pot. So they're shouting, they're screaming, they won't do anything that you ask them to do, they want dinner but don't want dinner. And you end up thinking, what am I doing wrong here? How can they have such a great day in school and they come home and everything has gone wrong?
So in today's podcast, we're going to unpick this a little bit for you and understand the patterns as to what's actually going on in these circumstances from a trauma-informed lens. So I think this topic comes up quite a lot. I think we say this a lot. We've thrown all the all difficult scenarios, but I do think this comes up a lot in consultations where families are really worried and they're like, what am I doing wrong? Because at school everything's absolutely fine. They have glowing reports, like you said, at the school gate, that, you know, at the handover, like, yeah, fabulous day, brilliant, they played with their friends, lovely. Even in parents' evening, they might get, you know, a great report. But, you know, at home, and the conversations that you're having with your supervising social worker or a social worker are not those conversations, because you're really struggling at home with high-level challenging behaviours. You're seeing non-compliance, you're seeing refusal and anything, and you're thinking, well, it's got to be me.
Yeah.
And that's such a knock to your parenting and your confidence.
Absolutely. And I think it can go two ways. It's well, it's got to be me. What am I doing wrong? And you feel completely useless, I think, a lot as a parent when you get to that point. But then equally, sometimes you can start to question, well, what's school not telling me? Because I can't be seeing all of this at home, and then suddenly they go to school and that's turned off and everything's completely fine. So why is school not telling me the truth? It can cause difficulties between home and school. But then two, it's not helpful sometimes for parents because they just feel like they can't get anything right.
Yeah. Oh, on the flip side to that as well, parents thinking, no one's believing me. Like, this is actually going on in my house. Like, I'm really struggling. Are they not believing me? Because sometimes I will turn up to consultations and they're like, Rach, this is really happening. Like, do you believe me? And of course, like, you know, they're not going to lie about something like that. It's just that in school, that setting is just not seeing those behaviours, which we'll come on to talk about why that might be. But I think parents then feel a bit worried that, like, oh, maybe people think that I'm not being truthful about this and I'm genuinely struggling and I'm worried about whether I'm doing something wrong.
Yeah, or just maybe not being truthful, but, well, they must be exaggerating that. It can't be that bad.
Yeah.
Which often isn't the case. It is that bad.
And I think when this comes up in consultations is providing a lot of reassurance to parents and carers that, absolutely, like, I'm just here to, like, gather as much information as possible to understand why this might be going on, completely understand that it is going on, and we need to find some solutions to it, because, you know, as a family they can't continue with that. So providing that reassurance and confidence that, you know, it's just something that we've got to find a solution to.
So if we start picking this apart a little, I think the first point to make is that children will always push boundaries more with their parents. Now this is just kind of a opening point. It's not to say that they're just pushing boundaries with you, because with a lot of our children it's not just pushing boundaries, but it is something we need to bear in mind, that all children, whether they've experienced trauma or not experienced trauma, will push boundaries more with their parents. So there's more likelihood of having more escalations at home.
And I think even like with some friends or other family members, it's quite a common story of parents going to parents' evening, like, oh, your child's perfect. And sometimes my friends are like, will say to me, well, they're cheeky in the house.
Yeah.
you know, that is at like the lowest level. But yeah, I completely understand what you're saying, that children would generally push more boundaries with their parents because where they feel safest.
Yeah, so they feel safest with you, they know you're around, they're going to push those boundaries more. But there is so much more that comes into it with children who've experienced trauma, but we do always need to bear that in mind in the background as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's just take a look at school first then, and what school offers for children. And I think this might be one of the reasons why behaviour might be cropping up. So school provides children with that structure and that predictability. There's lots of routine. Boundaries are very clearly stated. You've got your school rules, you've got your classroom rules, there's constant feedback, there's constant guidance. So it really sets up all the advice we would really give, for care experienced children. That's how we're going to support stability and helping them to succeed, because all those things are in place typically.
And those are really the things that we want for children who've experienced trauma, that they have that consistency, that predictability, that repetition that then creates that reliability. And you said schools are set up for that. Not every class is set up in that way. Just wanted to point that out. There are differences.
That's why I said typically.
Typically, yeah. But typically there's lots of rules, there's boundaries, there's structure, there's consistency in the day, which gives those foundations that set a child up for success.
Yeah, definitely. And even that like constant guidance and feedback, children are getting that continually on any behaviour that they're engaging in. And again, that just adds to that predictability and that reliability that we know. Consistency, predictability, reliability, they are the foundations that we need to provide children, especially children that are care experienced. So schools and classrooms are providing that to a high level. That's what schools should be set up like. So at home, if we're taking that advice, that's what we've got to follow then, isn't it, in setting up that routine, that structure. And that's maybe a first place to start really, is how can we mimic some of what a school setting can offer? Because if a simple explanation, I suppose, is half term, summer holidays, children really struggle during those times because that structure is instantly taken away. And we know that when we're providing consultations with families, half terms, Easter, summer holidays, Christmas, we know that they're tricky times for children for lots of different reasons, but that loss of structure and predictability is one of the reasons why we see a spike in behaviours during those times, because aside from your meals, your breakfast, lunch and your dinner, school are also saying, okay, we got this lesson next. After lunch we're going to be doing this. So there's lots of prep, there's lots of discussion, there's lots of guidance. And setting our homes up like that will support a reduction in some of those challenges. Yeah,
and I think particularly in the younger years, you see lots of that structure within schools. If a child is having difficulty in school, one of the first things we look at is the structure and routines. And quite often, if a child is having difficulties, we find that the structure and routine has maybe slipped or isn't there, and we're looking at how do we re-implement this.
Yeah, like your Friday afternoon free time. Children don't really respond well to that, same as if they've got supply cover. I remember those days in school, or if there's like film day, you're going to see some children slip through the net, where we're going to see some challenges. So I think a lot has got to say for creating that consistency, predictability and reliability within a setting to put a bit of a lid, a bit of a blanket on some of those behaviours. So that could be potentially a reason that we might see some spikes. So another thing that I was thinking about when we came up with this topic was the Coke bottle analogy in terms of explaining behaviours and triggers. So if you imagine, I suppose, your child has a bottle of pop, and they go to school, and there's lots of different demands, there's lots of different instructions that are presented, there's difficulties, there's transitions, but every time something like that happens, you shake that bottle. It creates a little bit of frustration, but every time they encounter that, then that fizz is just bubbling up and bubbling up and bubbling up. And it could be then they come home, there's, again, put your bag, put your coat away, tidy your bedroom before you come down to dinner. There's lots of instructions and demands, and there's difficulties within that. And it could be they get home and that's when things explode, because they've reached that level. All these little triggers have happened, and it's like, I can't contain this anymore, and I'm just going to completely explode.
Yeah.
And you might get that fallout at home.
And you've got to think, this brings us back to our first point of children will push more boundaries with parents who they know are there, consistent and safe. So when they're in safe environments, so they know that in that environment they can explode and they'll still be safe.
Yeah.
So you've got those two elements then that are interacting.
Yeah. And that's where you kind of see those behavioural challenges then happen, and they play out. But it could, and we might not ever get to the bottom of that, but it's something to definitely consider, that may happen, and we may feel that, you know, in our day to day, where it's just like that straw that broke the camel's back, and I'm gonna, I don't know, shout at my husband for something that he hasn't done.
It can happen with all of us, can't it? If we're having a particularly difficult day, so we were stuck in a traffic jam in the morning, didn't get to work on time, and then our computer broke when we were in work, someone came to us with a problem that we couldn't fix, someone else came to us and really annoyed us, and by the time we go home, we're ready to explode. It's the exact same effect is happening with our children. And
I've used my husband as an example, but that, for, you know, talking about safe people, I know that I could probably shout at him.
Yeah.
And things are going to be okay after, you know. It's not going to be a big fallout. It's a safe space to raise my voice, you know, because we can repair after that. And I think the same goes for our children.
Yeah.
Like you said, is that home is like a safe place to kind of explode.
That is exactly why my teenage daughter explodes at me all the time at the moment.
Things will settle quite quickly.
They'll settle, and she knows I will have a word, but then everything will be fine again. So she knows she can do that.
Yeah, and that's how like behaviour works, isn't it? So I think it's just important. The point we were trying to make here is just important to consider that this is what might be happening as well in some cases. Maybe not every day, there might be some other things going on, but just remember that analogy, and especially with your own behaviour as well, like that is something that can happen where there is just one thing, the straw that breaks the camel's back, and that's where we might be seeing behaviour play out in the safest place.
So that kind of leads us nicely on to something else which I think is important to recognise. Something I think we talk about a lot is children that mask in school. And I wanted to highlight that there is masking, but then there is children who don't mask and they're fine in school. And we don't want to always assume that there is masking. So first off, what is masking? So masking is when you're putting up a front or putting up a brave face, you might be suppressing your needs to avoid rejection, essentially. You are putting on this brave face or putting this image of yourself out there so that you don't get rejected or you don't get further consequences, which lots of our children will do in school. So they might suppress those difficulties, they might suppress their needs, they might suppress difficult behaviour that comes out elsewhere because they know that there will be more rejection or more pain if they show that side of themselves in school. And that's what masking is. And I think when we have children who are displaying lots of challenges at home and there's not challenges in school, it can be very easy to assume that they are masking in school. But that might not be the case. There will 100% be children that are masking, but we need to look at it objectively and think, well, are they masking or are they not masking? Because if school has got a lot of what you talked about earlier with that routine, that structure, that reliability, children actually might feel quite safe in school and they might be doing okay, they might be doing really well. And it might be that they're actually doing well there and they're not masking, and we shouldn't assume that it's masking all the time.
Yeah, definitely.
But there are some signs. So we go and observe children a lot in school to look at what's going on, and there are some really obvious signs if a child is masking, because although they do keep it together, they usually don't keep those subtle signs in check, so you can see. So the first one that I always look for when I'm assessing a child in school is hypervigilance. Are they hypervigilant? Are they looking for any person who enters the room? Being a new person in the classroom, usually when we're observing, it's really easy to see that hypervigilance because they will be looking at us.
And they'll be over straight away, asking questions.
Hello, who are you? Why are you in my classroom today? Shall I sit right next to you? That happens quite often.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so if that happens, it kind of gives you a sign of, okay, this child is very observant of what's going on. Maybe they're not as fine as we think they are within the school environment. So the next point then, it kind of goes hand in hand with hypervigilance, is that wariness. So it's wariness of new people, but it also might be wariness of just tasks, being overly anxious about tasks, might be asking the teacher a lot of questions. It might be doing their best to get it right, and not wanting to ask for help as well. You have to really observe that to try and pinpoint what's going on for that individual child. I think a big one that is a telltale sign is concentration. So children who struggle to concentrate, and where we can see that really clearly with younger children particularly is carpet time, where they sit down, listen to stories, or there's an activity on the carpet. They can't sit still, they're wandering, their concentration really wanders, or if they've got a specific task, they can't focus on it. And that's a good sign that actually there might be more masking going on than we've considered.
Yeah, and for younger children, we were talking before we kind of press record, was for younger children in foundation phase, it kind of suits them at that age to kind of go around and just interact with lots of different, it could be, I'm not concentrating on one thing, but I'm flitting, you've got to miss that. But when there's a focused task, they might be there for 2 seconds and then they're off. Or if there's carpet time, like you said, and then they're off. That's like another kind of telltale sign for a younger child, and kind of picking up some of these like red flags. So when I go into schools anyway, those are the things I'm looking out for. Am I seeing hypervigilance? Am I seeing wariness? Am I seeing that they can't concentrate very well? Am I seeing, on a positive, that they're engaging with their peers, they're able to have conversations, they seem quite settled with their peers? Or am I seeing a child that seems to want to please everybody and is more anxious around their peers? Sometimes those signs are quite subtle, but if we can pick up on them, we can actually work out, are they actually doing okay in school, or are they masking? And then you're getting that big blow up when they go home. And that's really important to understand what that might look like across the ages as well, because that might look very different, or just the behaviour might present very different for a younger child versus someone that's older, and picking up on them really early on is important to know, like, is this masking or is something else going on? And I think that fits into what you were talking about earlier, Rachel, before we actually started recording again, with attachment styles, because particularly in teens you can almost predict the way that they're going to react based on their attachment style. So if a young person uses more ambivalent style attachment behaviours, then they're far more likely to ask for help, ask for lots of support if they're doing a task that they're struggling with, or if they want to mask, they're going to surround themselves with people. Whereas an avoidant child
will try to do everything on their own, and they'll be the ones who always say this in our tribe training. They fly under the radar because nobody notices that anything is wrong, because they seem content, they seem like they're getting on with their work, but internally they're really, really struggling. Yeah.
So everything that you've just said is just important to know the differences there and what to pick up on at different points in a child's life in terms of their age, to understand what's really going on at school and why are we seeing this difference then at home, to get to the bottom of it.
Yeah.
So another thing that we wanted to talk about today as a potential reason why we might be seeing these differences in behaviour in different settings, and we do have a behavioural term for that. It's called behavioural contrast. Now, to explain this to you, so you can understand it in this context, when you have a behaviour that is heavily reinforced in one environment, what you might see then in other environments, you kind of see these spikes, and this is what might be going on in versus school versus home. It can be vice versa as well, but it's important to consider that in one environment, if there's any changes, like behaviours are really reinforced, it's tightly controlled, you might see spikes in other areas, kind of linking into what we were talking about, that safe space being home as well. And we know this because behaviour is shaped by our environment. So if two different environments are providing different things, you will see different responses in some cases. So having these meetings, an MDT meeting, to understand what are those environments looking like, what are those similarities, what are those differences, is there anything that we can learn from one another in terms of environments to set that up for success for our children, because it could be something like that's going on where we're seeing this contrast in behaviour because they're so different.
So to give an example of that, you might have a child, for example, who has had difficulties in school and they're hitting out in school, so they hit a lot of their peers. School puts support in, that support works, and there is no longer any hitting in school. But at home, they suddenly start hitting their siblings all the time. And then there's those discussions about, well, this might be fine in school now, but we're having real problems at home. That's behavioural contrast, where an intervention is put in one environment and you see the opposite effect in an environment that hasn't been changed at all. So it's not really related, but that's what behavioural contrast is. And
that's where we see behaviour crop up.
And it's something that's scientifically proven to happen time and time again. So we know that might happen.
Exactly. So another thing to be considering, why we're seeing these differences in these two environments, school versus home, because behavioural contrast might be at play. So let's wrap up this podcast by looking at a question that was asked by a carer in one of our tribe trainings. So this carer had said, I feel like no one believes me, which we have covered this, isn't it? And it's quite common. So no one believes me when I say that I'm seeing behaviours at home, because at school these behaviours do not exist. How do I get other people to understand what I'm going through?
I think there's a number of ways that you can do this. One of the first things I encourage parents to do when we first meet a parent who has this difficulty is to say, right, start recording what's happening. So you've got how often is this happening? How extreme is it? So that when we do have an MDT meeting, you can give that information. And then my second point would be is to have MDT meetings, not necessarily just parent and school, because it can be helpful to have other people there to give some context around that. And that could be, if you've got a consultant like us involved, having one of us. It could be having a social worker who comes to that meeting as well, to talk about what's going on at home. And then importantly, really look at how can we work together. So in school, what is happening in school? If things are going really well, great, what can we learn from that? But also asking that question, do we need to look at this a little bit more closely because mum or dad or both are having these big outbursts when the child comes home?
And in my experience, schools are more than happy to offer some help and some guidance, and at least provide some of the things that are working at school so parents can try at home. And that's usually like the first step, isn't it? Before these MDT meetings are called. So I think there's a lot of benefit to widen that invite, to invite more professionals along to that. So like you said, you're adding to that context, and you're opening that conversation to others to get more advice. Okay, so some key takeaways from our discussion from today. So if your child completely falls apart at home and things are going well at school, it doesn't mean that you're the problem. We just need to unpick what is actually going on. And it could be that you're their safest place. So things that we've talked about today is considering that school setting and what that offers and what we can mimic at home that will help with the behaviour at home, but also understanding, is your child masking in school, or again is there something else that is going on there that we need to understand. So I guess the goal isn't to well, you're not the problem for starters. We just need to understand. That's what our goal is, isn't it? To understand what is actually going on, what are the patterns that we're seeing. Let's just unpick this problem and start implementing some strategies that are gonna support, learn from others, gather guidance from others, and encourage those MDT discussions as well.
So if you want to know more about trauma-informed care, then subscribe to Tribe for more trauma-informed care in practice.